Imagine leading your company through very difficult times with high stakes. How do you manage risk and make decisions under such heavy pressure? We interviewed Laurent KOLODZIEJ, ex-Eurocorps Army Commander, to discover what CEOs and other managers can learn from the Army world. Please note that the views he expresses are his personal views and do not reflect those of the French Army nor Eurocorps. Welcome to this podcast where we explore risk management, decision-making in challenging times. I'm Philippe, co-founder of the Engage Institute. We offer innovative training solutions for insurance companies worldwide. Do you struggle to capture the knowledge of your experts? Contact us. We'll record engaging interviews with them for you to share. Now join me as we delve deeper into the Army world together.
Today on the show, I have the great pleasure to welcome Lieutenant General Laurent KOLODZIEJ. First, I would like to ask you a little question. How can I call you? Should I call you General? Sir, what is the right term to use?
Given I'm retired now, I'm considered as a civilian, so Laurent would be great and easier.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurent. It's a pleasure. So, Laurent, you were a Lieutenant General for the Eurocorps, the embryo of the European Army, or can I say that?
Yes, you can, but Eurocorps is a little bit misleading because the name tends to create a link between this formation or headquarters with the European Union institution, but actually there is no link. Eurocorps has been christened after an idea of France and Germany to create a binational headquarter, and then some other participating nations joined. And it's basically a grouping of 6 framework nations, actually European Union members, but there is no direct link with the EU institutions as such.
Okay, so it's very different from the EU. As an Army Lieutenant General, what do you do? What is your role?
As a Eurocorps commander, my responsibility was to make sure that the headquarters, the command post, was ready to be deployed and to take command of any large operation decided either by NATO or by our 6 framework nations. So my responsibility was to make sure that the headquarters was trained, manned, equipped, ready to be deployed.
And this means in an international settings with these 6 different countries. So there was a lot of coordination with people from different cultures and languages.
Yes, you're right. But we have decided between the 6 framework nations to use English as working language first. And for daily procedures and operational procedures, we use NATO procedures because Eurocorps is a member of what we call a High Readiness Forces Command Post. And there are 9 of them in this area. And we are all ready to serve NATO and to be deployed by NATO or 6 framework nations. So we have common languages, common procedures, a common grammar. And this helps to coordinate between different military cultures and backgrounds.
So I understand you had up to 60,000 men in these operations. That's quite a substantial force, isn't it?
And this force would be a joint force. That means we would have people from armies, from air forces, from navies, and from special operations. So you have to coordinate different branches between forces and also different nations. And it requires a lot of preparation and training.
So from just 1.5 years ago, it was said that NATO was not that relevant anymore. It seems that in light of what we see in Ukraine, this has changed a little bit.
It has. Yes, I think the war in Ukraine reminded us what NATO was for, which is a collective defense of the European continent, plus Canada and the USA. And that makes NATO very relevant in the world in which we are living.
But that was really something from the past. It seemed that at some point we thought, okay, we still have these armies, but war is not going to hit us in the way. We have terrorism and cyber threats. And it seems that history has come back on us.
Yes, you're right. And I think we are going back to period where large powers were confronting each other and that kind of things. So history is not a linear process. It's a circle which sometimes comes back. But what we are living today reminds us of what was the world of 40 years ago, but also with, I would say, new aspects and parameters.
Such as, what do you mean with new parameters?
I think we are just out from a globalization era, and there are still interconnections between the different powers. We depend on Russia, for example, for our wheat supply. We depend from Russia for our gas and oil supplies. 40 years ago, there were not such interconnections between the West and the East. And another aspect, we are now living with new technologies. I mean, IA, for example, the social networks, which make the information area very different, much more active and dynamic. So the world is somehow going back into the old times of the Cold War, but with new parameters and new dimensions, I would say. So that makes the current situation quite difficult to grasp.
And you just mentioned artificial intelligence, AI. How does that change the parameters for the battlefield or for war overall?
Even though the processes are not complete now, all armies and all alliances are using IA to help the decision-making processes, for example, and to manage the big data issues we have in collecting intelligence information or detecting, I would say, low signals. So it helps a lot the decision-making process in the command post, such as Eurocorps. And also it helps a lot to bring some sort of automatism in some weapons delivery as well. Calculations, information management, decision-making, these are the main areas where IA is now changing things.
So when are we going to see an AI general? Basically, AI has shown now that it's able to surpass a lot of humans from a capability point of view, understanding. And why don't we have a general which is artificial intelligence based?
That's a very important question. In Western armies, and I think the same applies to all armies, keeping the human beings in the loop is very important because our job is to decide how to kill and who is to be killed because our nations have decided to go on war. That's very important to be able to discriminate between different settings, different situations, and to keep the human being in the loop is very important because the responsibility of waging a war is great and difficult. So the ethics aspects of waging a war are very important.
If I just may challenge you on that, Laurent, look, AI would be able to get all the components from the battlefield, and we could bring in some part of the ethics, the concepts into AI, the decision parameters. Why wouldn't AI be able to take these decisions?
Because you know better than me how AI functions. It's about statistics, and ethical decisions are made on values. And I don't think AI is able to decide on values.
Yeah, there might be some big changes over the next few years in this. But yeah, so for now, AI is just coming here to support the decision-making process for the general, for the top commander.
That's it. It helps particularly to detect, I would say, small signals, just to be able to discriminate some very important bits amongst a busy background, for example, and it goes faster than any human mind.
So what does an army lieutenant general do? What is your job like?
Basically, to decide. And in that single word, it means a lot to have done a sufficient exhaustive planning to be able to decide in any operation what is the right time to attack, what kind of enemy we have in front of you, what kind of action you may devise to overcome the enemy, and you try to understand how your enemy or adversary works, does its business, how he plans his operation. So it's a very challenging intellectual job. And to take the right decision in the benefit of your people to accomplish the mission you have been given, that's the job of a commander. To command is to decide. And sometimes it's a very heavy burden on your shoulders.
So how do you manage with such a burden to sleep well? Isn't that a tough thing?
I remember some uncomfortable nights because I've decided upon operations which were difficult. I was not 100% sure I have taken the right decision because there is always a part of war fog, and sometimes it's difficult. But your command post, your staff is there to help. And a command post such as Eurocorps is 600 or 700 men and women strong. And you have people who are specialized in intelligence. Some are specialized, I would say, logistics. Some are specialized in what we call engineers, which is about the terrain, how it looks, how difficult it is. Is it right for moving fast, or is it difficult because it's going to slow down your maneuver and that kind of things? So under the commander of the commander, there are 600 or 700 people in charge of preparing the right decisions, preparing the right assessment, and to assess if the campaign goes well, if the objectives we have devised are right, and so on and so forth. And it's a continuous process because it's not a fixed forever plan, and the plan is moving, the plan is to be adapted, and that's a very difficult job.
And you were the Eurocorps commander, so all this was on your shoulders.
The responsibility of the decision was on my shoulder, and it was the core of my mission, of my job. And the responsibility of the staff, the command post, was to prepare me to take the right decision at the right time. But the responsibility was mine. And during an operation, you are the one who might end up in the egg, for example.
So what are the skills you think are needed to do a job like yours?
It's about confidence. And confidence is drawn upon competence and to be able to establish the right mindset, to make your people believe in you and to make your people happy in the job they do for you. So it doesn't come in a blink. It needs to be trained. It needs to be implemented. It happens or it shows up after weeks of common training. And so your people know you are competent, you are able to decide, you are able to shoulder the good decisions and the bad decisions, and to be able to be held accountable for that. And to establish the right mindset between your team, because even though it's a 600 or 700 strong men and women team, it's a team. It's not a pyramid. And you have to create that positive mindset between your team members. And it takes time. It takes a lot of, I would say, efforts. You have to pay attention to others, and we have to know each other.
So I've never been to the army, but I would expect you have the general at the top and he tells the others what they have to do. Did you listen to these people really? Or what kind of role do you have? Do you always have to be the one knowing everything and deciding?
Yes, you are at the top of the pyramid, but I would prefer to say you are in the middle of a large circle of team members. You are the one who decides, but you need to listen to other people's opinions. You need to create that positive mindset which allows team members to speak out and sometimes to propose alternative options. At the end of the day, you need to be able to decide to get what is positive or what you need, and sometimes to say politely, yes, that's very interesting, but it's not relevant.
But as a general, when you have a young lieutenant that comes to you, does he have the right to oppose your views, or how does he express that, or she, in that case? It might be difficult.
It is difficult for a young lieutenant, and I was a young lieutenant 40 years ago. But if what he or she has to say, to express, seems to be so important for him or her, I think you have to create the opportunity for this lady or this gentleman to speak out and to speak directly to you. And you have some tricks to make that happen. When I was commander, I used to walk around the different branches of my staff and to speak with people informally. And sometimes those on the other side just say this opportunity to say something important to the commander. If you stay in your office, cut from the other, there is no way you can listen to what they have to say to you.
So go among you men and women to get to talk to them personally. That's your advice.
I would say more than that. Live among your men and women. Share the same difficulties, share the same experiences, and you will create that special link between you and them, which makes them able to speak out when speaking out is needed.
Okay. So how does that work? There are many people in the military. How did you become a general? How does that work? What is the process for that?
It's a 40-year process. Any military career is some sort of ladder. You are a young lieutenant, a young captain, and then you become more seasoned, more experienced, and then you are in charge of a battalion, which is 1,000 strong men and women formation. And then you take other responsibilities. And then at 50, for me, it was 49, you are selected to be a general. What are the qualities to be those who are in charge of choosing who becomes a general? Certainly pay attention to the qualities I mentioned before. These skills which make you able to create a positive team spirit even under duress is certainly one of the criteria they look very closely to.
They're quite very similar to what a CEO from a big company should do, but in extreme conditions. What could a CEOs from the large civil companies could learn from your military experience, for example? Is there anything you could share with them?
I'm sure there are many areas where these decision processes are very similar. Even though in any large, I would say, company, it's much more about introducing new equipment and making them work and then sold. We are living in a different world. It's about waging war or operations, but the decision process is certainly the same. There are many different aspects to take into account and then to make a synthesis and to take the right decision. It's not surprising that all these large companies have a strategy, a directorate or something like that. Strategy speaks for itself. It's a word coming from the military world. So I think there are many similarities between these worlds of large companies and the military world. So I think taking a decision in an uncertain environment is always difficult, and that applies to the military life as for any large company CEO.
Were you ever tempted to become a CEO from a large company? Has this idea ever crossed your mind?
I think I would not be able to do that because having spent 40 years in the army, it's a different world for me, and I would say it's an uncharted territory for me. But I can suspect some similarities between making a decision in my world or in my former world and making a decision as the head of a large company. But I've not ever dreamt of being a CEO of a large company.
Well, why would you say that?
As you don't become a general in a blink, being a CEO of a large company is the result of a long selection process. And you can't be a CEO of a large company at 25 or 30 because you need experience. You need to experience your company. You need to experience life to be a good leader. It's all about leadership. Some part of leadership, I would say, come from heaven, but most parts of leadership are the result of training and experience.
Is there one event that helps you strengthened your leadership style, or one experience that truly transformed you? Is there anything like that?
I would say no experience actually transformed me, but all difficult experience helped to build the kind of leader I was, because I'm no longer in charge. It is much more an incremental process rather than a transformational process. Difficult to say because I don't have the inside of saying, okay, I'm a good leader or I'm not a good leader. Actually, I don't know. But you have to learn from your failure first and to listen to people. I remember when I spotted very good leaders, I say, okay, he's a good leader or she's a good leader. Why? What kind of skill does he or she have? And that kind of thing. So you learn from your experience, from your failure, and from good and bad examples.
You speak a lot about learning. How is the training actually? How does that take place in the army?
It's a permanent process because you have to try every day to better yourself and to better your team. Because when you start to think, okay, I am good, you are going down. Even now, I think I still apply that mindset, trying always to learn, to be like a sponge and to take in the good examples and to reflect about the bad ones. It's a permanent process. When you say, I know everything I need to know, I think you are dead.
Yes. Like that. Back to the training. Did you use any technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality for training, and how?
In the army, we have a lot of simulation kits, which helps flying an helicopter, driving a main battle tank, for example. And now with the augmented reality, we start to be able to recreate difficult situations for an infantry platoon. For example, we are able to recreate a street of a city where the enemy is hiding and trying to negotiate and to navigate through these streets and to fall into an ambush and how you react. You can just recreate that using augmented reality goggles and to be able to behave in that world the way you would behave in any real world. Even though the bullets are not real, what you can experience through augmented reality is quite close to what we might experience in the real world.
That's something you're using already now? That you're using this for training?
Yes, we are starting to use that, but because all these machines, equipments are quite expensive, and we have to be sure that it really fulfills what we expect from that. And if it is flexible enough to be able to recreate any possible situation we might encounter and so on and so forth. So we start to really use that, but we are just at the beginning of the process, if I would say. But it is well used for flying aircraft, for example. But for training our people, training main battle tank crew or infantry platoon, we start to have some very good equipments, but it's just a start. I think in 10 years' time or in 5 years' time, all soldiers will go through that kind of augmented reality to be trained and to be used to difficult situations before being sent in operations, I'm sure. Because it's a very effective and money-saving, sweat-saving way to train people. Because augmented reality is absolutely, I would say, breathtaking.
Is there any way to simulate the whole battlefield? You were commanding large multinational operations. Is there a way to have all these big operations in a virtual environment?
You are able to simulate or to recreate large formations, but it's only map training. And this is exactly the kind of training I am doing now. But we use computers-assisted simulation to decide which formation wins over any enemy formation or the other way around. But you are not able to recreate all the real difficulty an infantryman might encounter in a trench.
At that level,
I see augmented reality as a benefit for training small groups of people actually on the front line. Because as a commander, my job was not to be on the front line. I would be in a command post commanding that 60,000 strong formation. That command post would be, I would say, between 50 or 100 kilometers from the front line. Even though we might get shellings, bombings, or missiles, I think it's not as difficult as it is to be an infantry soldier in the front line. So recreating the situation for the people in the front line is very important. What we need to do and what we are doing now at command post level and for generals is to recreate the decision-making process. Even though we can spice up a little bit the exercise we do, but I think it's two different situations. Maybe we can, in 10 years' time, recreate all the frictions which exist on the battlefield, but we are not there yet. But I don't think we need that level of precision at command post level. What we need in command post is to be able to train and to experience that difficult decision-making process we face, and which is our main challenge and our main mission.
So that is basically managing the different risks you have in front of you. How is it to manage risk when you have lives at stake? That's probably quite different than managing risk when you're selling healthcare or food products. What kind of frameworks do you have to manage the risk? Do you have some kind of special guidelines?
As a baseline, our military operations are all about taking risks to accomplish the mission, because the enemy is doing the same job and he is going to try to stop you and to kill you. So risk is at the core of our job. And we have very elaborated and developed processes to manage to, first of all, to identify all the risks we take, and then how we can mitigate and assess the mitigation process. So it's a very well-developed process we have in our procedures, our command post processes, and managing the risk is the key.
So to manage the risk, do you have any kind of insurance? Like you have planes, tanks, if a tank blows up, do you have any insurance to pay for that?
For the French army, the state is the insurance. So the state is to guarantee that if you are injured or wounded, you are going to receive compensation. But if you are also doing mistakes and ended up being blown out or falling into ambush, you are going to be held accountable for that. And you are going to have to explain why you took that decision and not this one. So the state is our insurance, but we are accountable in front of the state of what we do and how we do it.
So the army does not use regular general public insurance. It's the state that takes the risk. Now, on another topic, I would like to get your views on the famous cybersecurity. We see more and more cyber threats around the world, companies being attacked. Is France, Europe ready to fight this cyber war?
We have to. And nations have developed capabilities to protect our networks and also to detect attacks and to be able to trace back who is doing that. And also some nations have offensive capabilities to fight back cyber attacks.
So, I mean, France has offensive capabilities, from what I understood.
I can't say that for sure, but I don't imagine a country like my country not having that into the array of capabilities we have. Then to have the capability and to use the capability are two different things. But to be able to take offensive actions against attackers is very important.
So how do we compare, for example, with the US or China on that front?
On the cyber front,
Yes.
I would say we are not at the same level because it's an issue of scale and means. But I think cyber is not the most expensive part of the capabilities array for a country. So it's a question of skills to have the right people, not so much about money and means large organizations. We have created a special command for that, a cyber command, which is a joint command. And I believe we are quite good at that. I'm not a specialist, but if we have a special command, I think it's not a vacuum.
On another topic now, as we have some of our auditors and viewers who coming from the insurance world, banking, and they have to sell products. Did you ever have to sell anything, sell a project, an idea in the army?
Not to sell actual things, but to sell new ideas, new opinions, different ways of doing business, new organizations. Yes, it happened to me. Yeah.
Did you have to buy big things, I guess, tanks and planes? You must be a big buyer.
The buying process, what we call the procurement process, is a multiple part process. We have a special agency in France, which is called DGA, which is our procurement agency, which is in charge of that. So it's a multifaceted process with many stakeholders. The armed forces by themselves are just a part of it. We express needs. We would like a plane which flies at that level. We would like a main battle tank being able to do this and that. And then the DGA, that procurement agency, develop that capability with the industry. And then when it is bought by the state, provide us with the capability we hope for. Because it's a long process to develop a fighter jet. It takes certainly between the first ID and the procurement and the fielding of that capability, the aircraft, it takes sometimes 40 years, which is amazing because that loop in the civilian world is much, much shorter. I think a new iPhone is being developed in I would say, 6 or 10 months' time.
But that was also one of the challenges why a lot of countries in Europe bought, for example, American planes and weapons instead of buying European ones that had to be developed while American ones were already available.
Yes, they are available. They are on the shelves, so it's easier to buy combat-proven capabilities on the shelf than to develop that by yourself. And as I explained, for my country, we have that procurement agency, we have that long development process, and it's easier to buy from the shelf. My country has chosen to keep its own defense industry in order to be autonomous as well. So it's a political choice rather than a technical one.
And we need to have some independence in Europe too. So we're nearing the end of the interview, Laurent. I'm enjoying the discussion and I really like listening to you. What does a general do in his spare time?
I think a general hasn't any spare time.
Really?
I'm kidding. I think it's not a job, it's a lifetime endeavor. When I was still in active service not long ago, because I left 18 months ago, I use my spare time just to enjoy my family, but also to try to better myself every possible day. By reading books, I used to go to bed looking back to what I've done during the day. I say, did I achieve more right than wrongs? And if not, I try to make the next day better than the previous one. So to be a general, to be a leader is not something you quit when you get back home. To be a leader is a full-time job or a full-time endeavor.
What did your family think about that? I mean, if you're so committed to your job or to your mission, there must be a price there, something for the family or something tough times for them, no?
Yes, there are some tough times, but if you are committed to your people, you are committed to your family as well. I think they are part of the larger picture.
Now, what is a good weekend for you?
Starting with a good whiskey.
Yeah. Okay.
And a good dinner with my wife. I have my cats, 3 daughters from my previous marriage. They're all grown-ups now, independent. So it's a good whiskey with my wife. On Saturday, my wife rides her horse and I ride my back together and then visiting my mother because she's in home care now. And reading good books, exchanging mails with friends, and then that's it. So it's about relaxing a bit the tempo, but it's not doing nothing.
It does sound to me that you never do nothing. So, Laurent, it has been a great pleasure having this discussion with you. I wish you a nice ride, a nice book, a nice whiskey. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a wonderful weekend.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers! That's all for today's episode, where we brought you some of the latest and greatest from the training, technology, and innovation worlds. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our guests for sharing their valuable insight with us. If you struggle to capture the knowledge of your experts, contact us. We'll record engaging interviews with them for you to share. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our channel and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find us on YouTube or LinkedIn, where you can watch the full video of this interview and many others. This interview was made possible thanks to our colleagues Laura Servadio for the coordination of this interview and Patrice Séjalon for a powerful remote interview studio based on AI. Until next time, stay safe and stay insured. Cheers!